Welcome everyone to Funding Your Business with Joe May. Thank you so much, Joe, for coming and sharing your knowledge about this. And thank you all for attending our webinar. Before we get started on this very important presentation, I have a couple of slides that we need to get through. So Joe, if you click, I want to tell you just a little bit about SCORE. SCORE is a nationwide nonprofit organization that's a resource partner of the SBA, or Small Business Administration. We provide free confidential business mentoring in person and online. Our chapter, which is the Minnesota chapter, serving Manatee and Sarasota counties in Florida for more than 50 years, has over 80 volunteers standing by waiting to help you. If you need help in your business, please consider applying for a mentor. Our chapter was recently named Chapter of the Year, the District Chapter of the Year. In more than 50 years, SCORE has assisted over 11 million clients. Click. When can we help you in your business process? Well, we help you in all phases. Literally, sometimes it seems like people just woke up and said, I've got an idea. Let me see if it floats. And they will contact us to get a mentor, and we'll help you figure out, does it float? Does it sink? Sometimes it does either. Okay, or you're in the startup phase and you need some help with that, or you want to grow your business, or lastly, you want to sell or close your business, or conversely, you're interested in buying a business. We have a whole team designed to help you determine what the value is, whether you're buying or selling. So please consider applying for a mentor. Click. To do that, you go to score.org/Minnesota. And you can see right there, it says request a mentor. You click on that, fill in a little information, and the next day or two, somebody will be contacting you to help you with your journey. If you're interested in other workshops, consider clicking on local workshops and you'll see all of the upcoming workshops, or you can search for templates or other products that we have on our website. Click. And lastly, I want to thank our sponsors and community partners. Our sponsors help us keep the lights on, and our community partners help us get the job done. So really, between the two, this is a huge team that you have behind you. Click. So I want to turn this over to Joseph May. He is one of our SCORE mentors in our chapter. And thank you so much for doing this, Joe. Take it away.
Thank you, Diane, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A little bit of background on myself before we get started. I'm a retired banking executive, over 50 years in the industry, primarily in commercial lending, past chair of Risk Management Association, which you probably aren't familiar with, but it's a trade group of the top banks in the country, the top 2,000 banks overall. And in the interim, I do not only consulting for banks, but also obviously mentoring along the way. Let's get started, however, with the basics of finance and what you need to do. I'm going to highlight areas that I think are of interest, especially those of you who are interested in debt financing along the way. Step number one is make sure you understand exactly what you need, the capital required to either start a business or continue operations. 20% of the problems we see with entrepreneurs is they don't ask for enough money. They know their needs to open the business up, to buy the assets to start operations, but haven't factored in their working capital needs, especially in those first 3 to 6 months of operations. Most startups, and we get a lot of startups within SCORE, have a deficit cash flow in the first 3 to 6 months of operation. It is extremely important that you determine what those needs are going to be. You're only going to get one bite at this apple. When you apply for a loan, the expectation is you've asked for everything that you're going to need. You don't want to find yourself having the money to open the store or the operations, but unable to run it down the road and needing to borrow more money, because a second request within the first 6 to 12 months of operations is generally a red flag to a lender to be extremely careful. And the vast majority of the time, they will decline to provide additional funding. So getting it right up front and first is critical. Obviously, we're going to be looking at owner's equity, and I'll talk a little bit about that shortly. And borrowed funds. Most businesses are leveraged 3 or 4 or more times. The critical aspect for you to keep in mind as you're working on your numbers and your financing and your forecasts and projections is to make sure that, one, you've identified all those capital needs, including the working capital, and making sure that the debt you're requesting plus the equity you're investing equals that capital. Another red flag is if the debt and equity doesn't equal the capital required, that'll lead to a turndown in your loan request as you're looking at them. Again, just going quickly over capital needs, your fixed assets in the business, FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, perhaps real estate as well, your working capital, receivables, inventory, prepaid expenses like insurance and legal fees, your operating needs down the road, especially seasonal. We are in a very seasonal market here in the Sarasota Manatee community. As you know, the snowbirds are here now, so business is booming, but it's quite common for a lot of our clients to generate good profits in season and break even or even lose a little money in the off season. It's important for you to know that in terms of planning your capital needs, both seasonal and permanent. Last but not least, but critical to all of the above, is that business plan, which is going to include your financial forecast and your financial statements. What do you plan to do, especially for new businesses and startups? We need to have a good feel for what's there. Important to make sure that you have a business plan you're going to continue to use, not just develop it so that you can get a loan. Case in point, and I'll dwell on this just briefly, case of 2 different fencing companies. First one I encountered about 4 or 5 years ago, bought a business, didn't do a very good job on the due diligence side, using the client's numbers instead of tax returns. Bought the business, operated it, got a loan to assist him on the way with a business plan, which he utilized only to get the loan and then kind of put it on the back burner. Thought things were splendid, sales were up. He increased sales by $500,000. At the end of the year, he had no cash and he was behind on all of his bills. He couldn't understand it. He thought he was doing great. He never looked at his plans to see how he was doing, or more importantly, why he wasn't cash flowing if sales were so terrific. Unfortunately, what we discovered in working with him was that he had a good feel for his direct costs of labor and materials, but was clueless about his overhead and had underestimated what his overhead costs were, and therefore underbid, if you will, in his bidding what his overhead cost expense would be. He factored in about $20 a job when his actual overhead costs were over $220 per job. Thus, he lost money and was never able to recover. I'll highlight that later when we talk about the business plan. At the Manatee chapter here, we utilize the business model canvas primarily, but it highlights these critical points. Your business plan will have an executive summary, which should be done last. It's just a 1-page synopsis. Company description, very important. You detail, what do you do? Who does it? Where do you do it? For whom do you do it? Who utilizes your products? In essence, assume that the person at the other side, especially the lender, is clueless as to what you're doing. So you need to be as detailed as possible in describing what your company is about. Market analysis, and that is who is going to be buying your products. How many people are out there interested in your products and or services? What is your competition? How do you stack up to the competition? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Will you be able to tap into that market? Do you have an edge over your competition? Critical that you do a thorough job in analyzing the market to make sure there's a demand for your services. How are you going to be organized? How are you going to manage? Who does what, when, where, and how? What are your product lines? If you're doing air conditioning, do you do the ductwork? Do you do insulation? That type of thing. Need to describe it in more detail. Marketing, the lifeblood of your business is your sales. How do people know you exist? How are they going to take advantage of your products and services? Critical that you have an effective marketing plan to tap those markets. Funding requirements, that's your capital needs. How are you going to fund your operations and finance it? And most importantly of all, those financial projections. The first year, month by month financial projections. That'll help you identify those working capital needs so you make sure you've completely identified all of those capital requirements. Yes, you'll be expected to put in some equity. At least half of the people who come to us within SCORE generally have little or no money to put down. That is a red flag to a lender. 100% financing is rare. A reasonable amount of equity is generally considered to be 20 to 30% of your total capital needs. It does vary by type of business. You can put the money in yourself. You can borrow from family and friends, third-party investments, whether it's private equity groups or crowdfunding, whatever. However, if you're not putting the money in yourself and you're using family, friends, or other resources, you'll need to describe any agreements you have, such as repurchase or dividends, because that'll add to the decision-making process relative to extending credit to your particular company. The critical aspect for you to keep in mind relative to equity is that it reflects your commitment to the business. This is your skin in the game. You don't have any skin in the game. That's really basically saying you don't have much faith in this and you want somebody else to bear all of the risk. Equity is generally the highest risk investment. Debt is going in there to supplement that. Lenders, banks in particular, are operating with small margins. If they get it right, they make 1%. That's their profit margin. They've got to be right 99% of the time. That's why they're conservative. Your investment reflects not only your commitment, but your ability to manage funds. If you have seller funding, then we'll want to look at the terms, and you want to be sure that it's going to be subordinated to senior lenders along the way. Brief word on SBIC. We don't utilize them much. Small Business Investment Corporations. These are privately owned investment funds licensed and regulated by the SBA, but they are generally involved in funding big ticket operations. They generally talk in terms of millions, where most of our SCORE clients talk in terms of thousands. There are 3 active SBICs in our market, but they are all headquartered in Tampa. They have the same investment standards as the SBA does otherwise, in terms of it's got to be a for-profit US business, has to meet small business standards, and has to be in an approved industry. Debt financing is fairly common, and we're going to go through some of the key aspects that you need to consider in making your application. One, you need to be prepared to share your business license and copies of any of your leases. I'm going to talk about leasing a little bit later. They'll want to look at your historical financial statements if you've been in business. Certainly your last 3 years worth of tax returns, current interim statements. They'll want to see your projected statements for the next 12 months. What do you expect to do going forward? Keep in mind now, these will be evaluated by analysts at the financial institution that you're applying for a loan. They have access to industry data. When they're looking at your historical statements and your projections, they're going to compare you to industry data. If your numbers like gross profit margins, net profit margins, leverage, asset management, receivable inventory turnover differ from the industry, they're going to expect your business plan to explain why and how that's going to be either good or bad for the business. If you don't have that explanation, they will probably decline your loan request because you're Johnny out of step from the parade. Your numbers don't match industry perspective. You'll be asked to provide a personal financial statement and your last 3 years worth of tax returns. The banks will assess your business and look at your cash flow. They're looking for a debt service coverage of 1.5 times. Your profit plus depreciation divided by principal, interest, and lease payments must provide a cash flow coverage of 1.2 times. If it's less than that, the odds are they will decline the application as being too risky. This is especially true now. Those standards had dipped a year or two ago down to 1.1, but they have bumped up in anticipation of a recession. Recent study by RMA, the Risk Management Association, indicating that almost all banks have tightened their standards for lending and made it a little more difficult raising the bar for approval. Commercial credit, if you qualify, you want to come here and not at the SBA because the rates will be cheaper. It's for an existing business that has at least 3 years of successful operations, i.e. profits, as reflected on the tax returns. If you haven't been in business for 3 years or you're not generating profits during all of those timeframes, then you want to consider the SBA. Otherwise, look at commercial financing through commercial banks, savings and loans, credit unions, finance companies. They all provide commercial financing. Term loans for fixed assets, lines for seasonal needs, revolving credits for both seasonal and permanent working capital. The life of the loan is generally tied to the life of the assets. The advance rates are predicated on the market value of those assets, 70 to 80% on equipment, 80% on receivables, 25 to 50% on inventory, 60 to 80% on real estate are fairly common, although it will vary somewhat by business. The key is 3 years of successful operations reflected by profits on your tax returns. You as the owner will still be asked to guarantee the loan, and they look at credit scores for the owners to be in the 700 plus range on your FICO score. Interest rates will range typically at around prime plus 1. Prime today is at 7.5%, likely to change this afternoon after the Fed raises their interest rates. The SBA will provide financing for those who don't meet those criteria. You've got a new business, or you don't have 3 years of profitable operations. The SBA sponsors programs to fund for-profit businesses. This is not for nonprofits, so it's not for a church or for other entities that are in the nonprofit area. They're providing programs to fund for-profit businesses. The SBA does not make loans, but certifies lenders to make loans using their own prudent underwriting standards. So the underwriting standards literally vary by bank along the way. The financial institutions offer those loans in compliance with the SBA conditions, which basically require that there is strict adherence to the bank's underwriting policies and monitoring. The banks will pay a fee for the guarantee. It is a limited guarantee that they get. They don't get 100% guarantee. It's typically around 75%. So there is risk on the part of the bank. Again, keep in mind, they only have a 1% margin. So they are very careful on looking at those guarantees. You as the owner would be expected to guarantee the business loan. If the business defaults on its loans, the SBA will not pay the lender its guarantee until they've liquidated the business and made an approach to you for payment on your guarantee. It's only after they've done those that they would get, quote, their 75% on the shortfall. The most common SBA program is the 7A program. Again, offers limited guarantees on term loans and lines of credit, typically in the 75% range, again, for-profit businesses. They do allow much higher advance rates, in some instances as much as 100%, but the rates are higher too. The interest rates will range anywhere from 2.25% to 4.75% over prime. That means you're going to be paying interest in the 10% plus range, plus the guarantee fee. Although most financial institutions are certified lenders, only about half of them are active lenders. Your most likely success is going to be applying for the loans at the bank you do business with. Before you do that, though, I would urge you to contact either SCORE or the SBA because we can tell you whether or not they're active as SBA lenders. There's no sense, they're not going to tell you they're not active as an applicant, but we have records in terms of who's making loans and who's not. There's no sense in your applying to somebody who's not making loans. They'll take the application, they'll run it through their system. 3 or 4 weeks later, they'll send you their declination letter, which has now hurt your credit score because you've applied for and been declined for a loan. You want to apply only at those institutions that are actively making loans, and we'll try to help you assess how qualified you are relative to their underwriting policies and getting approval for your SBA loan. SBA loan application requirements start with their application form 1919. You can obtain this as well as the personal financial statement form 413 at sba.gov. Both are going to be required as part of your loan application. They'll want to see your last 3 years of personal, and if you've been in business tax returns. They'll want to see that 1-year projection, which should be part of your business plan overall. They're going to expect you have some equity in the business, 20 to 30% overall. Obviously, copy of the license and leases as described before, the business plan, and a favorable credit history. Terms are much more favorable under the SBA 7A program than under the commercial program. You can get financing for your real estate. Again, it has to be not rental property, meaning you're not going to be buying the asset to lease it out to somebody else. This is a owner-user proposition. Terms under the SBA program, maximum 25 years. Practically in our market, it's the banks generally stick to 20 years. FF&E, you can get up to 10 years. That's favorable. On a commercial financing, that's typically limited to 7 to 10 years. SBA, you can get up to 10 years. Working capital, 1 to 10 years. Pledge of all the assets, and of course, your guarantee. Perhaps the best financing program available in our market is the SBA 504 program. This provides for financing of your real estate. Again, not rental property. So apartment buildings are out. Any rental properties are excluded. This is owner user. The benefit to you is 90% financing. You put in 10%. A CDC, that's a certified development company, puts in 40%. They have a second mortgage and 100% SBA guarantee. And a financial institution puts in the remaining 50%. And they have no SBA guarantee, but they have a first mortgage. The CDC is happy because they have 100% guarantee from the SBA. The bank is happy at 50% loan to value, and you should be happy because you only have to put 10% down. However, you will be personally guaranteeing both the CDC loan and the bank loan. If you're interested in doing this, you would approach the CDC, not the bank. We have 3 very active CDCs in our market listed here: Sunshine State Economic Development, Florida Business Development, and Independent Development Service Corporation. They make over 1 loan per week under this program. The application requirements are the same as you see with a 7A loan, plus they require an appraisal on the real estate, an inspection of the property, both structural, keep in mind what happened down to that condo complex that collapsed in Miami about a year or so ago, as well as environmental. And they look at the zoning constraints to make sure that your business can operate in that particular locale. So there are a few extra items required for the 504, but it's well worth it. The CDC rates are very attractive. And this is probably the easiest SBA loan that you can obtain. For smaller loans, you can look at microloans. Microloans are less than $50,000. And again, to put it in perspective, the average 7A loan in our market is $107,000. The average microloan in our market is $13,000. So you get an idea of relativity. The microloans are generally underwritten looking primarily at you, the owner of the business. So they're going to look at your credit score, should be a minimum of 680 to qualify. The 1 hang-up or 2 hang-ups associated with a microloan are that the maximum term is only 6 years. whereas you can get 10 or more years under the 7A program, and the interest rates are generally higher under the microloans than they are under the standard 7A loan program. But the turnaround time is much faster, especially because they're smaller loans. They don't want to put a lot of time, energy, and resources into it. You're in business. If you're in the retail, wholesale, or manufacturing end of the business, you want to take advantage of trade credit, otherwise seen on your balance sheet as an accounts payable, i.e. you want to be able to purchase your products, your inventory, and other assets on open account, buy now, pay later. For most of those businesses in the retail, wholesale, and manufacturing trade, accounts payable will probably be your single largest creditor. They will finance 25 to 50% or more of your inventory. Good news is it's interest-free. You're not paying the 10% you have under the 7A program, or the 7.5%, 8.5% you might pay even as a commercial lender. There is no interest expense, but you must pay on time. If they give you 30 days, you pay in 30 days. If you don't pay on time, several things happen. One, they charge you more for replenishing your supply. Two, they take a lien on the inventory, which is not going to make your bank very happy. Three, if you continue to be a slow pay, they cut you off. That's what's happening with Bed Bath & Beyond, as you look at their troubles in the paper here recently, or years ago with Sears. Their trade suppliers cut them off, refused to sell them even on a cash basis. So it's a kind of a two-edged sword. Great opportunity, saves your company a lot of money, but must be handled properly if you want to succeed. Leases. Everybody leases something. I have yet to see a business in operation that doesn't lease some assets, if not an awful lot of their assets. Vehicles for deliveries, furniture and equipment, real estate, in essence, the space you're operating out of, are all fairly common. The big advantage of leases are that they provide nearly 100% financing. However, it's the most expensive financing. Best way I can describe it, I floor planned 600 car dealers in this country. Their single best profit margin on the sale of the vehicle is if you leased it. The worst thing you could do is buy it for cash. Second worst, if you would, be to use one of their financing options. They would be most delighted if you would lease it. That's where they make their biggest bucks, their most money. Most leases require you, the lessee, to pay taxes, insurance, and maintenance on those assets, plus you'll have a security deposit. Words of caution on leases. If you have a lease, you want to get the maximum term you can. Generally, they're going to give you a lease on non-real estate up to the life of the asset. On real estate, you want your initial lease term plus renewals to be at least 10 years. Lenders will try to keep their loans equal to or less than whatever your lease term is, as defined by renewal options that you have. I would recommend that you, if you don't buy real estate, that when you lease an asset, you try to get a lease with purchase option. Many of my clients have exercised this opportunity and found themselves able to buy their real estate and use the 504 program to fund 90% of it. Terrific deal, and you'll find owning the real estate is much more beneficial long-term than leasing the real estate. One of my clients in Venice purchased her store 10 years ago for $200,000. She was offered $1.2 million for it last month. So you get an idea of value on real estate. That was commercial retail space. Speaking of leases, again, I urge you to take advantage of SCORE counseling or advice from your attorney or your accountant, but important to really have the lease terms in your favor. One, so you can renew it. I'm heartened by the fact that I used to have breakfast at Broken Egg on Siesta Key. They had a great breakfast lunch facility. My wife and I really enjoyed it. And then was surprised 5 years later, they lost their lease. The landlord thought, hey, this is a terrific business. It is. They failed to renew Broken Egg's lease, and they opened up a breakfast and lunch place that's doing terrific. All because Broken Egg, a otherwise savvy business operation, did not factor in renewal options that they controlled. The other thing you want to do is to make sure that if you're in a shopping mall, for example, with Publix, if Publix leaves that facility, you want to get concessions on your rent. You paid a premium for that space because Publix draws a lot of people. If they're not there, you don't want to be paying a premium for an eyesore that's vacant down the way. You also don't want to be sitting there and discovering that, gee, I've got this nice business. Maybe it's an eyeglass store, and LensCrafters opens up next to you. You want to have some control that you don't have competition. These are just some of the thoughts to keep in mind and some of the benefits that having a counselor will help you with. Factors. For those of you who have receivables from your clients and need money fast, you can go to a factor. These are companies that specialize in buying your receivables. They can either pay on time, so you don't have to worry about, will my client pay me or not, and will they pay me on time? Or at a discount, typically about 6%, so it's a hefty price. They'll buy the receivable from you and give you 94 cents on the dollar. It's a financing option. Subordinated debt. You as a owner don't have to put all the money into the business in the form of equity. You can put it in as a combination of debt and equity. Think of the program on TV, Shark Tank, and Mr. Wonderful, and how he structures his deals. So he puts in some equity, but he puts in some debt so he doesn't have to put everything in or put all of his money into the operation. He can split it out and recover his investments. Prior owners who are trying to sell businesses often take a loan back, which is great. You want to be sure that that's junior to senior lenders you'll go to will finance that business. Otherwise, it won't serve as a beneficial investment other than covering some of the cost of the acquisition along the way. I'm always asked about grants, and I've got to tell you, for startup operations, they are virtually non-existent. Yes, there have been a couple. In my 16 years of doing mentoring within SCORE, I have found only a couple of situations where entrepreneurs have been successful in getting very small dollar amount grants, $2,000, $3,000, not big money at all. One that has worked somewhat successfully, several of my clients have been able to get small grants at Sam's Club. Sam's, however, gives it to them in credit for merchandise, not in cash. So you can try, but it's not something that I would hang my hat on or bet on in terms of what you're going to be able to obtain. In conclusion, as a wrap up, trying to stay within my allotted time frame here, determine all of your business capital needs, including that working capital, seasonal and permanent. That's why we have you go through all of those painstaking efforts of doing a forecast next year, month by month. And again, I want to emphasize the importance of not just to get the loan, but to operate your business. Early on, I mentioned the fence company that went an entire year, sales going up, thinking things were terrific, only to discovering he was losing his shirt and going out of business. Well, surprisingly enough, just last year, encountered another fence company, similar size, $2.5 million in sales. He came to us in April. Sales were up, earnings were down. How did he know? He looked at his business plan. He knew what to expect in terms of sales. He did slightly better, which he was happy about, but then frowned when he saw he was not making as much money. Usually when you sell more, you expect to make more. He wanted to know why. We spent some time with him going over, because he was having difficulty determining how was this happening. He too knew his direct costs, labor and overhead. He also knew his indirect costs for overhead, insurance, utilities, rents, et al. So he was perplexed, as were we. After spending a number of hours at his facility, we finally learned that he had introduced just this year, last year, new software that he used for bidding on his projects. And we said, aha, maybe that's the culprit, although he shared with us it's used by thousands of other contractors around the country. And it's been very successful. He shared with us some of the checking he had done to vet them as being good, qualified vendors of this software. And gee, it all looked positive. We began to look at, okay, well, let's look at your input. And lo and behold, we found the culprit. When he put in his labor hours, he meant to type in $18 an hour. In reality, he only typed in 8. He dropped out the 1. Thus, he was underestimating his direct labor hours for producing his product, winning more business, and losing more money. The good news is he found it, he corrected it. Bad news is he had still on a contract for the next 6 weeks on bids that he successfully won at the lower rate, which he did. He bit the bullet, but he returned to expected performance thereafter. His business is still successful, sales are growing, and most importantly, earnings and cash flow are growing as well. This is not a one-time event, it's a continuum. Every successful business I've worked with for over 50 years has had not only a business plan, but their budgets and forecasts, and they use them for situations just like the fence company. When I don't perform as expected, I need to adjust, and you need to do it now, not like the initial fence company who waited a year and by then was out of cash and it was really too late. And those are my stories and I'm sticking to them. Again, want to encourage you to take advantage of the counseling you can get within SCORE. Keep in mind, we have over 90 members within our local chapter here, and we do a lot of co-counseling. So it's not just talking with one of us, but as we run into problems, my expertise is in finance. When somebody needs help in marketing or operations or software, we have experts in our membership that we are glad to join in and provide assistance. It's one of the few things the government is going to give to you that's not going to cost you anything. And we hope we can be of assistance in helping you with developing your operations to be highly successful. We've had a lot of winners and we'd like a lot more. We wish you the best of success in your financing, and if I can be of any assistance in helping you with your application and sorting out who to approach and what resources to use, be delighted to assist you, as would any of us within the Minnesota SCORE chapter. And with that, I'll turn it over to Diane for Q&A.
Thank you. Just a couple of closing thoughts before Q&A. Please visit our website, score.org/Minnesota. This is a new address for us. So if you have the old one bookmarked, it'll probably work for a while, but this is our new address. And there you request a mentor. Even if you have just a simple question, sometimes you don't really need a whole mentor. You can apply for one, put in your question. If it's pretty simple, you may just get the resources that you're looking for. Look at other workshops. We had a couple of questions in the chat about veteran benefits. We have 2 webinars coming up in March. They're not ready yet to sign up for, but they're directed towards the needs of veterans. So keep checking our webinar schedule. Since you've been to this webinar, you will be getting emails about our upcoming webinars. So one more click, Joe, and I think that brings us to our last slide. I just want to let you know that you will be getting an email. You'll be getting 2 emails actually from us. One is the one that has a recording of this presentation and the slides. And the second is from our national organization asking you to evaluate our presentation today and to rate Joe on a scale of 1 to 10. Remember, 10 is the highest, and we strive for 9s or 10s. So if you think that Joe did a great job, as I do, that would be great. Okay, so let's look at our questions. LaShawn says, with the standards that you outline, many Black business owners and entrepreneurs are at a grave disadvantage. What, if any, are alternative options for Black business owners?
My suggestion there, again, leaning on SCORE counseling, as a number of my clients are in the minority community, is to look to us as a resource, as we can help you put together your business plan, help you think through the process, give you direction on where to turn, how to do it. We have literally step-by-step fill-in-the-blank type of packages that we can share with you to help you walk through the process, as well as identify where you should go to seek that application. And we do some of that vetting ahead of time, so you have a pretty good idea of to what the realistic expectations are. Again, the benefit within SCORE overall is to use the mentors to help you in understanding what your needs are and how to fulfill those particular needs. In my case, looking at financing, how we can assist you in putting that business plan together and the forecast. We spend a lot of time doing that. I know at times it can be frustrating. I've had a number of clients who want to start like yesterday.
Yeah.
And putting together these plans, it often takes several months to do, but it's well worthwhile. Everybody who takes that time and energy to put in the elbow grease necessary to do the job right finds themselves quite happy a year or two later with a very successful operation.
All right, Bonnie is asking, I am looking to buy real estate as an event business. So it is a new business. Can the 5014 loans be used for a new business?
The answer is yes, it can be used for startup businesses. A lot is going to be predicated on that plan as you're looking at quoted an event business. They'll want to know what kind of events at all, and that would all have to be described in your business plan. So a lot's going to ride on, one, have you identified the location that you're looking for? Is it suitable for the events, properly zoned at all, amongst other things? But most importantly is going to be an awful lot of pressure on you to have a business plan emphasizing that this is going to work. So energy has to be put in that direction. But to answer your question, yes, 504 programs would include such an enterprise and startup as well. I've had a number of startup businesses successfully obtain 504 loans. So that's not a knockout punch, if you will. But again, after you've gone through the exercise and making sure you've got that business plan together and all the I's dotted and T's crossed, then you approach the CDC. The CDC will tell you their level of interest. There are 3 of them. They are generally very interested, so I think you'd be successful in that regard. They in turn will help you not only put together the application with them and do the appraisals at all, but they will also give you suggestions as to the bank that likes that type of real estate.
Wonderful. Brad is asking, who are the active SBA microloan lenders in our area?
I don't have the list right in front of me, but as you talk with your mentor, we are able to access the SBA website, which gives us a list of the top 100 lenders in the marketplace, which would be Florida. And we narrow that down to our particular Southeast region overall to identify who's making the loans and what type of loans are they making. Because they don't all gravitate towards startups. Many of them provide a 7A financing for existing businesses that don't meet that 3 years of successful operations, if you will, or they have significant growing pains and commercial underwriters have become more conservative and found that the SBA is a better option for them. So to answer your question, you need to contact your mentor. They'll be able to access the websites that we have that tell us who they are. You could also go to the SBA.gov and look for active lenders. They do have, you would be able to access it there as well. You might find it a little easier to go through us only because we would be able to identify those in this market specifically. The SBA.gov is going to tell you countrywide who's the most active, not necessarily the ones in our community.
And many of our banking partners are definitely active lenders. But don't you agree, Joe, that if you go into any of these banks with a SCORE mentor on your arm, they'll listen to you a lot more than they will if you walk in by yourself?
Absolutely. They know you've got some support here, and they also know that a lot of the information provided has already been vetted and looked at. So
Exactly.
It gives you a little bit of a leg up along the way. Good thought and idea there.
Okay, Amber wants to know, I'm wanting to open a retail educational toy store. My plan is to get funding through equity crowdfunding. I want to do monthly community events and offer a small grant annually to send a child to an educational science or technology summer camp. I'd like the option to do this without pushback. Is there a way to having my investors non-voting members? And do you have a resource I can look at?
Crowdfunding is available. It is not fast and it is not cheap. Generally, we've only had a few success stories with crowdfunding. Obviously, the media paints a picture of lots of success. And nationwide, there's a large number, but not necessarily locally. Generally, it takes $4,000 or $5,000 investment on your part to set up your crowdfunding request. And it's going to take you several months of making that solicitation to see how successful it may be overall. And I don't have any magic wand to be able to tell you whether or not your particular venture will be something that they're interested in and that you would be successful with. I don't have that crystal ball. Again, you need to be aware the upfront cost to seek crowdfunding and the time horizon that you'd be looking at as the key elements. Generally, you're going to be able to call the shots in terms of the parameters that you're seeking as you're looking for funds under crowdfunding, in terms of how much interference, control, if any, that these investors may have. You set those parameters, and that also dictates their level of interest along the way.
Rebecca is asking, can I get a loan before I have a retail location? How long can I sit on the loan before I decide to use it, i.e., in the case it takes months to find a good retail location?
Generally speaking, they won't commit without a location.
Right.
So you're going to need to have that location identified. You don't have to have it locked in with a lease at all. You can be in discussions. Obviously, you don't want to get locked in and not have a loan necessarily, but you should have the location identified. And should you obtain a loan, be able to solidify that lease arrangement on the location. Absent a location, most lenders will not entertain the loan request.
It's just an idea without a location.
It impacts the market dramatically. There's a big difference between, are you going to be at the UTC mall?
Yeah.
Are you going to be at a strip shopping center with Publix? Or are you going to be at an independent strip shopping center that has no anchor? It has a huge impact on the retail business and the traffic that you're going to obtain. And certainly will have a big impact on the lenders. As a result, most lenders want to see that you've already identified the location and done the market research for that location. Not having a location as a retailer is generally a non-starter.
Right. Good. Okay, LaShawn. I established my business in 2019, but did not really begin operations until 2020. My business has not sold any products or services, but we have been operational. Are you all able to assist with helping to determine ways of generating revenue? I'd love to know, LaShawn, what this business is that hasn't sold any products or services yet. If you could type that in, that would be great. I think it would help Joe answer your question, but go ahead, Joe.
Well, sales is the lifeblood of all businesses, and the lack of sales is a huge red flag. Having been in operations for now 2 years and change with no sales is a daunting mountain to climb in terms of obtaining financing. The vast majority of lenders in our market would consider that an eyeball turn down. They'd just say no. I can't opine beyond that because obviously I don't know the product or service or what you're trying to do or sell. We need to look at it, but the key there is need to identify what product or service you're going to sell and how we can start marketing it, because until you show that there's an interest in the product, lenders are going to be very skittish. Keep in mind now, the bank's profit margin is 1%. That's all they're going to make on a loan. And statistically, the odds are if you have no sales, you are way beyond 1% risk. You're more in the 50+% risk. And as a result, most vendors won't even entertain a request. They probably won't even accept an application.
Yeah. LaShawn says it's an e-commerce marketplace. However, the website developer did not do what he promised. Sad story that we've heard too many times, unfortunately. Okay, Amber is saying, if I get a few corporate sponsors to support my startup, would that be something that might help me acquire an angel investor? I think Amber is the toy company.
Yes, sponsors would be very beneficial if you have somebody like Hasbro or Lego or somebody else as a particular sponsor that would probably have great assistance in trying to bring in additional investors to assist you. Keep in mind, though, most investors want a return.
Yes.
So if you think of the television program Shark Tank, they're going to want to own a piece of the business and get a return. They're going to be assessing the likelihood of success and measure that against what they perceive as the risk, much like a lender. Unlike a lender, however, most of your investors are looking for returns in the 20–25% range. So they're going to be looking for substantial ownership and forecasts that would suggest they're going to get a pretty good return.
Okay, we have Letitia, who's in a dispatching and logistics business and wants to get funded for a Sprinter van to start her fleet. I have been building my business credit and have 2 business accounts. Should I try for funding through one of them first?
Without more detail, it's really tough to ascertain. I will throw out 2 items. One, you're looking at a vehicle, obviously a microloan might be easier to obtain than a 7A loan, both in terms of time. Again, you have the 6-year constraint. My experience, however, is if you're going to be buying a vehicle, a van, a truck, or anything of that nature, I would explore the dealers. The dealers have quite a large list of alternative financing, if you will, including leasing, which might be the most attractive for the acquisition that you're looking at there. But most dealers have 15 to 20 different financing sources. They're in the business of moving the vehicles, and the one thing they don't want to get in the way is your inability to get credit, whether it's a loan or a lease. So they have multiple choices and opportunities. Clearly, they're going to pick the one that gives them the most profit first, and it'll be up to you to evaluate that and compare it to other options, if you will. But I would explore either financing through the dealer and or a microloan in terms of purchasing the vehicle that you would use in your business.
LaShawn has a follow-up to her previous questions. We have multiple divisions. One of these divisions is a live streaming podcast where we conduct exclusive interviews and conduct product and service reviews. That actually, I guess, is not a question, just a clarification. So, and I guess are people paying you to review their products and services? Is that your revenue stream, LaShawn? That's a question that I would have for her. While she's answering that, here's another question. What amount of revenue should go to marketing? Like if I want to make 200,000, is 10% a good number?
The marketing budget is going to vary dramatically by the type of business. It's not uncommon to see marketing in the 3 to 5% range, sometimes more, but it varies significantly by the nature of the business that you're involved in terms of how much marketing you've got to go through and what those costs are going to entail overall. It's impossible to give you a percentage. It'll range anywhere from, I'd say, as little as 3% to as much as 25%, and everywhere in between, without sitting down and being able to look specifically at the business and its operation. It'd be impossible to give you any number.
Sometimes you can get really creative about that, and it can be very cheap, but it really depends upon who your target audience is and where they are. Mm-hmm. So I think you're right, Joe, that's an impossible question to answer. What is your advice to acquire a loan for a business that had decreased sales ending 2022? The past 4 months off-peak season was slow and did affect my personal credit a little. My business credit is fine. I'm trying to expand. It's a pressure washing commercial cleaning. I do have a SCORE mentor and have completed a new business plan.
And what was the question
again?
Your
question, right. Right. What is your advice to acquire a loan for a business that had decreased sales ending in 2022?
Again, the key question there is it still profitable? And what led to that decrease? It could be COVID related. It could be Hurricane Ian related. A whole bunch of factors that may influence it. The key there is your explanation as to, okay, I need a loan. What do you need the loan for? And why will the business pick up? What happened in 22 that won't happen in 23 and 24? If you have a good explanation for that, you have a good opportunity to get a loan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Following up, Lisa, who is the person asking about marketing, she is in real estate. It's profitable, I would guess COVID related. Oh, why the business went down. This is people are not putting their questions in the Q&A, so it's a little hard for me to follow sometimes. But
if you have a good excuse as to why business softened, and I've got a number of clients that were adversely impacted, especially down in the Venice area by Hurricane Ian, on top of COVID prior to that, and they've been received favorably in terms of getting both relief on existing loans as well as obtaining new loans, because we can see that they know their business, and it's unlikely that these adverse events will continue, and they can get financing. Again, the SBA becomes very helpful there. Commercial lenders become very skittish by those situations, but are much more receptive using the 7A SBA program to fund needs of businesses that have had temporary setbacks. So that's fairly common. And the other person mentioned something else, Diane?
Oh, Lisa, it turns out the person asking about marketing costs is a real estate agent. And I have to tell you, Lisa, I have many friends who are realtors, and I see what they put on Facebook. It's a constant drip, drip, drip that is sending them to wonderful articles, and they're helping the community. They're having webinars to teach people about funding, about saving, and all kinds of plans. It again, as Joe said before, the cost of marketing varies greatly. How much are you willing to do as opposed to hiring other people to do also?
I can at least address some of that. A couple of the real estate agents, if you will, or agencies that I've worked with are spending 10% or more on marketing. It's highly competitive. You've got lots of players out there.
Yeah.
There's a battle for listing. There's a battle for sales. It's an ongoing process that doesn't go away, and you have to be in front of the prospective clients kind of like all of the time, which adds to your marketing costs, both online and otherwise. Just look at the paper and the ads in the paper. It gives you a pretty good feel for that. And that's probably the one of the lower cost items.
And actually, I think one of the best things for realtors, I used to work with them extensively, is to find a market. I mean, specifically identify a market, whether it's a community or co-ops or condos, or I guess co-ops not so much anymore, but condos, and target that, send out postcards, tell them who's selling and what they sold for, all kinds of ways that you can do it. Yep. A SCORE mentor might be able to help you that. Okay, Letitia, I am registered with sam.gov as well, and have been doing subcontracts with Friend registered as well, but want to see about funding to cover payroll expenses. So on until the invoices are paid out in 30 days. Would it be possible to get funding to cover those expenses? And what financing would be best in this situation, since the return to payback would be fairly quick, as most contracts pay out 14, 30, 60 days?
Again, a lot's going to rely on your ability to do forecasting, because there may be some seasonality that impacts your operations. But the answer is yes, you can get funding, and it's probably either going to be a line of credit or a revolving credit. And depending on the history of your business, it could be commercial or 7A related, but that's fairly common needs for businesses, and loans are granted. Again, it'd be a line of credit or a revolving credit.
Okay, and Lisa, I don't believe that you can get an SBA loan to fund marketing. What do you think, Joe?
It's a soft cost, but they're going to be looking at the overall picture. If it's, I would not exclude it as it's a proper use of funds within a business overall. The key there is being able to see the end of the rainbow and see that this is going to pay dividends. Now, if you're a startup and it's pure marketing, they'll probably want you to have your equity fund that as opposed to the debt. But if you're an existing business, it's quite possible to get funding for marketing costs.
All right. Guess what, Joe? We have no more questions.
Good. Well, I hope we've been of some assistance to those who have still hung on and stayed with us. Again, take advantage of what SCORE has to offer with mentors, and utilize them to assist you along the way. I hope we provided some assistance here. This is in 45 minutes, we're just scratching the surface in terms of what's out there and how to get it. And counseling with a mentor will allow us to specifically address your needs and your situation, and how best we can assist you in obtaining the funding you need for your business. I thank you for your time and attention, and I wish you the best of success in your continued operations, and hope you take advantage of SCORE. And Diane, thank you very much for leading the program and being of assistance in making this all work.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing your expertise, and thank all of those who are still here. You will be getting an email with a link to this presentation as well as the slides. So thank you all. Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye now.